Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another week of Eating at a Meeting. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, founder of the podcast and this broadcast, as well as Thrive Meetings and Events. And every week I talk to experts in all facets of food and beverage so that we can become better at creating safer, more sustainable, and more inclusive food and beverage experiences. And I have to say, on Monday, I had one topic on my mind that we were going to talk about today, but I was talking to my guest, Nancy Burns, and I'm like, okay, I need you to stop talking right now, and we're going to talk about this on Wednesday. I'm talking about Jewish holidays because Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are this month. And I'm like, we need to talk about this because with meeting planning and events, there's so many events that are planned on the different Jewish holidays. And I want people to understand what they all are and what we need to do as planners and caterers and vendors and, venues on doing this. So springing this on to Nancy on Monday. She is a meeting professional, corporate meetings and incentives. She does corporate and incentive meeting programs with specialties in sourcing, site selection, contract negotiations. Deborah Shapiro, on my right on the screen, maybe on your left, is a marketing, merchandising, and operations strategy executive who focuses on brand advertising, product merchandising, and creative design. She's got 15 years of experience in retail. And she did training for food service companies, food companies, grocery stores and stuff around kosher holidays and understanding the different levels of kosher, et cetera. So I figured the two wonderful women to talk about this and educate me and everyone else. So welcome, Nancy and Deborah.
Thank you, Tracy.
So I want to start off. Well, so Deborah, you wrote the story in Facilities and Destinations magazine, right? In 2016, and I will post that for everybody to read. But there's so many topics that are in that article about, being kosher or being Jewish and tending events during, that are held over kosher holidays and or trying to get something that's kosher while you're at an event. So I want to delve into all of those as well. And I will give everybody the link, but can we talk about, because Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are coming up, can each of you touch on maybe one of you touch on what one is and what the other one is and what we need to do this month to recognize them? Is that a lot? That's a loaded question.
Do you want to start, Nancy, or do you want me to?
No, actually, I'm going to defer to Deborah because I'd like to fill in some of the blanks where it comes to family dining as well, and then maybe interject how we can work better with our clients in their planning around the holiday time periods. So perhaps Deborah can start to talk about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as the next set of holidays. That might be a good start.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the high holy days. They're the holiest days of the year in the Jewish calendar. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. And so normally, no matter what level of Judaism you practice, you celebrate those holidays in some way. Some just have meals at home, some go to synagogue, but most do take the days off. Up north, in the northern part of the United States, Northeast especially, they're actually days off of school on the school calendar. So they're regarded as, people know that it is a time of family. It is a major holiday in which we would want to be together. So it is always top of mind to try to avoid those dates on the calendar. And it can be a little sticky because the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar versus the English calendar, which is the solar calendar. So the dates change every single year. So this year, Rosh Hashanah starts the evening of Labor Day and it goes for 2 days. And since it's the beginning of the month of September and right after Labor Day, a lot of people are starting things on Tuesday, not recognizing or realizing that a lot of attendees will be unable to come because it's one of the holiest days of the year.
And to Deborah's point, our school calendar came out during the spring and identified Wednesday as the first day of school, which is the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So the community banded together, notified the district, and the calendar was changed to open on Thursday the 9th, so that people can be with their families, attend synagogue services, whether in person or via Zoom, attend family meals, etc.
Oh, that's awesome that they were able to do that. And was that done like well in advance, or I mean, when was the calendar listed?
The calendar first came out during the spring, and not long after it was updated to reflect the 9th.
That's fantastic. And I was saying before the show, and I have said this in some of my educational sessions, that there is a website somewhere, I don't remember, it's like 84 or 85 days in the year that don't have a religious or government holiday on it. And it's hard to plan meetings, have everybody plan their meetings around those dates. So can you both give some advice on how we can learn when these holidays are, which ones that we really need, meeting planners really need to pay attention to when planning events?
So the most important, the easiest way actually to do it is to just whatever calendar system you use, whether it's Outlook, Apple Calendar, Google Calendar, all of them have calendars that you can import. So you can actually import the Jewish holidays into any calendar that you have right there on your work calendar, so that if you're going to a date and you're like, okay, I want to do this on September 8th. Oh, wait a minute. What does it say up there? That says Rosh Hashanah. Okay, well, maybe I should do that on a different day. So the holidays really to look out for, to try not to plan events on or during, are Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover. Passover specifically because there's very strong dietary restrictions. And it's also another holiday that, regardless of how you practice Judaism, families come together and want to be together on those holidays. So those are like our main holidays that I would avoid in planning meetings. There's a ton of other ones for other reasons throughout the calendar year that you can pay more attention to if you're in a very heavy populated Jewish area, or if your audience is heavily populated Jewish. But otherwise, those are the main ones to try to avoid. But in general, there's great things that you can do in terms of kosher options at any meeting in general.
And also, not only avoiding the programming, but consider travel time. So for example, if a program is convening in New York or Boston or Jacksonville and people are local, they can get home before the day before the holiday and still be in place. But if they're flying, then that presents a different challenge. So you really have to consider the audience and from where they're coming or where they're returning to.
Well, and Nancy, I know you do a lot of food prep. There's a lot of food prep for some of these holidays, and we need to take that into consideration as well.
Sorry. As a matter of fact, our immediate local family, my husband's side of the family, we're 27 when we get together.
Wow.
So when you think of all the food prep for that, families will often each take one night of the holiday. But if you're going to upend one house might as well support, both nights of Rosh Hashanah, for example. And in our family, we attend different synagogues. So we're usually in our homes on the first night, and we observe meals on the first day and second day, because those are the days that we actually can be together. So yes, there is a lot of food prep. There are a lot of traditional foods. And believe me, it's kind of tricky to move away from what's traditional, especially when you have some foodie cousins who say, lemon zest in your noodle kugel? I don't think so.
For retailers, it's really great to understand when these holidays are, because you can market to them. Like Nancy said, like there's large grocery baskets, and caterers as well can really tack on to helping with these large meals that sometimes go up to 30, 40 people. There's a little smaller now during COVID, but most families that, are been together now, they're still having large meals. we actually put together at my company a merchandising plan per holiday that tells you how many weeks prior to the holiday to start merchandising holiday food, which foods for each holiday. For example, Rosh Hashanah is a big apples and honey and sweet holiday. And even though Yom Kippur is a fasting holiday, people still have to eat before the fast. They like carbo load, so there's a lot of different things that you can do as a caterer or a retailer with specific foods in stock. And even advertising in the local Jewish magazines, Jewish papers that you have catering. Even if you're not a kosher caterer, there are those who do kosher style who just like some symbolic foods for the holiday. And then if you're a kosher caterer, it's good to let your services known to surrounding, halls, etc., that may want to host. A lot of synagogues actually do group dinners, especially around Passover, that also need catering.
So so just talking about catering, and I don't even, so there was a caterer in Atlanta that I met, or I was chatting with a couple of years ago, and somebody was trying to rent his facility, and it was for a Jewish event. And he said, she's like, we need it kosher. And he's like, well, how kosher do you need it? And he is Jewish and grew up in a very kosher house. He said his mom had 7 different sets of plates, right? But
I don't even know if I have that many.
Well, I'm thinking minimum 4, but go ahead.
Okay. So he's like, well, how kosher do you need it? And she's like, well, there's only one kind of kosher. And he's like, well, if you want to rent our space, we need to kasherize it. Is that right? Did I say that word right?
Yeah. Sure, yes.
And which means we need to bring in things early. You're going to have to pay the food and beverage minimum for the whole facility for the night because it's the only kitchen we have. And she goes, well, we don't need it that kosher.
Well, that even makes sense because in order to be kosher, you're bringing in a mashgiach. Right. There's a method to it. So it's not just taking a bottle of 409 and wiping down the counters and making sure, the bacon grease is gone. There's more to it than that.
Well, and that caterer is familiar with that and does that. So they rent that theater out a lot for that. But it's just funny that, well, and I don't know if it's funny. It's like, and a rabbi said to me one time, not every, there's flexi koshers, right?
Well, the way I used to teach it to the stores is there's different levels of kosher, but there's really only one set of kosher rules. There's different levels on the way people keep kosher, personally, on how much they want to take on of the rules. But kosher is not about religion. Kosher is 100% science. So it's all about cross-contamination, quality assurance, and a lot of people who don't even keep kosher look for kosher symbols like vegetarians and stuff that help mark out what products are meat and what are free of meat, etc. And it's almost like a second set of eyes that are going in and expecting to make sure there's cleans. I one time had to reject a vendor for Winn-Dixie stores because they said they were losing their kosher certification, and when we asked why, they said, because we had a ventilation equipment that dripped one product into another product, and we could possibly cross-contaminate this product with non-kosher product. I'm like, well, you have much bigger issues than losing your kosher certification because you're going to lose our business if you're dripping one product into another product, because I don't need a vegetarian getting meat sauce in their salsa. It was a salsa company that also did spaghetti sauce, and that was the problem. I'm like, so in a lot of ends, kosher, the rules of kosher make things very clean and nice and separated. But in terms of the way that people keep kosher, there's some people who just keep kosher style, who just, and then there's some people who are like, well, I want to keep my milk and meat separate. I want everything clean and separate, but I don't need supervision. And so I created something for the stores that we call the kosher equation, which is ingredients plus equipment plus supervision equals kosher. If you have to have kosher ingredients, kosher equipment, which is the koshering that you're talking about, which is basically just cleaning everything, boiling it or blowtorching it and getting off all food residues. And then a supervisor there to ensure that everything stays clean and inspects all the ingredients. If you have all 3 of those elements there, then something can be classified as kosher. But there are people, when it's a private event, who have their own sort of stringencies, just sort of like it's the same thing. It's like, how many people that that don't go to mass, but they give up something for Lent.
Right.
It's the same thing. Since religion is personal, there's some that's like, well, as long as the ingredients are kosher, I don't care about the equipment, the supervision. Some people are like, well, as long as you've cleaned everything and the ingredients are kosher, I don't need you to pay for a supervisor, and I don't want to expense the cost of you not being able to produce anything else because you have the supervisor there and everything has to be separate. For private events, it ends up being a matter of personal opinion. But if you are catering at a public conference, and if you're catering for a corporate event, then Nancy is right. There is only one type of kosher, and then you use that highest classification of kosher that has ingredients, supervision, and equipment all together so that all levels of guests feel comfortable and can participate in it. So it's very important to know the different levels of kosher supervision in your city so that if you're doing a corporate event, you should go to the one that everybody will accept. Private events, yes, you can have your flexibility with 5 private events.
That was great, Deborah. Thank you so much. Because it really does change the perception. And I know, or not the perception, but the understanding of it, because we do really need to value and respect everybody's different levels of adherence, I get to the diet, to the regulations, to the guidelines. And just so you know, did you know in the state of Massachusetts, you're not allowed to say kosher style? They've made it illegal.
And yes, it's also you're not allowed to use the word kosher on something unless it's actually certified kosher. I don't know about kosher style, what Massachusetts did, but I have heard of some states, especially in Israel, it's because you can't say it's kosher unless it's a certification issue. Just like you can't say something is milk unless it's cow's milk. You have to then state it's goat's milk and that kind of stuff. So they're just trying to clarify that if you are saying something is kosher, kosher style basically just means either traditional foods or you've done keeping your milk and meat separate. It may not be kosher meat. It may not be kosher dairy. It's just kind of keeping with the essence.
Exactly.
But there really is no such thing. There's really just one type of kosher.
So in your article, there was a comment of kosher gate. It happened at a convention. It was a topic of conversation at one of the convention education sessions on dietary restrictions and meeting planners. When we ask attendees, do you have any dietary restrictions, and people who ask for kosher or halal or any other kind of dietary need, and then they don't pick them up. And for the kosher meals, it can get quite expensive. I know there's a hotel in Chicago that charges $310 for a hot kosher meal. And so it's kind of frustrating on planner side because of the budgetary aspect. And to me, the food waste as well. There's a whole variety of that. So do either one of you have some suggestions on how we can mitigate kosher gate and help individuals eat at events and pick up the food that they requested?
There have been times that I've addressed people one-on-one. I'm generally the one who goes into that special requirements list in all of our attendee lists. And if something jumps out at me, other than a particular allergen that we might be able to handle differently, if somebody's looking for halal or looking for kosher, I'll likely address them one-on-one. Because while I was discussing there's only one way to really kosher a kitchen, to have it be entirely kosher, there are people who will dine at different levels of kosher. Still a question mark, I believe, but people may be kosher at home and may dine out kosher, but they also, when at a conference, they might eat dairy. They might eat seafood, not shellfish. And if they are designating kosher, I may want to address them one-on-one, explaining that I do understand what kosher means. I'm not making this an arbitrary question, but will you require that we bring in kosher meals for you? Because we can do that. Do we need prepackaged kosher snacks with the certification? We can do that. Fresh fruit is generally a given, bananas, apples, oranges, things like that. But I will address their needs one-on-one to see how we really need to accommodate them. Our programs The ones that we have managed aren't generally more than 2,000, 2,500. They more often fall in the 15 to 16, 1,700 range. So it's a manageable list when it comes to special requirements so that we can do that. And sometimes it may just be 2 or 3 people, maybe more than that, but we want to make sure that everybody's comfortable, that everybody can dine comfortably. And it's really not that difficult. Now, the cost is a factor. And, you know, when you tell me that a Chicago hotel was charging $310 for a kosher meal, you know what that says to me? I'm sorry. That says to me, we don't want to do that. It can't possibly be that. I do understand that kosher ingredients come at a premium, but then they're charging maybe $100 to deliver the meal.
Right.
It doesn't, I don't understand. And I'm sure I'm enraging hoteliers who are listening, who say, no, Nancy, it really does cost that, but it just can't. It can't.
I mean, there's also some things that you can do in terms of saying, will you require kosher meals for every meal? Like, for example, some meeting attendees might say, just get me kosher lunches. I'm traveling to Chicago. There's amazing kosher restaurants. I'm leaving and I'm going out to dinner. So like, you don't have to like buy me dinner for any night of the conference. I'd rather not have tray packs, but for lunches, great. There might be some that are like,
yes,
I don't need anything, but they might write kosher to see what's available. So if you're clear on there saying by ordering, like if you, for kosher, you might want to say, I want kosher meals at these, and like actually write down all the meal times of the conference and have them check out when they want their meal. And then of course, Nancy, what you do is amazing because like you said, everybody holds differently. And the last thing you want to do is bring in a meal that somebody can't eat. It's a waste of time and money for everybody. And so it's good. A lot of people keep kosher also of other dietary restrictions like gluten-free, etc. So you're going to order like a kosher pizza and somebody who's kosher gluten-free is going to be like, can't do that. Like, you know, like you might want to, you know, still reach out like Nancy says to everybody, but to mitigate kosher gate is if you were to make instead of just check off here, make that section of your conference application more detailed. I require kosher or halal or vegetarian meals for these meal seatings, and let them check off when they want it, and it will save time and money and energy for everyone.
I like that. So there's in the registration systems that I give people, you know, designing them, I say which meals, and especially now with COVID, you know, which meals are you going to be attending, you know, to save money. It's like, that's actually a better question to ask after you've asked the dietary needs versus beforehand, because, but then again, you also want to ask it of everybody, but it does give you the opportunity to not order a meal for you. Maybe you're going to the synagogue during one of the meals or something else. So you don't need to order that meal. And David, our friend David Korn, mentioned that to me one time too. He's like, why are you ordering me a meal when I'm not actually going to be here?
Yeah, especially if the conference is over the weekend, and if they decide on the Sabbath to go to synagogue on the Saturday, you won't need meals for them Friday night or Saturday, but you'll need them Sunday and Friday afternoon, you know?
Okay.
We haven't taken it that step further, and that's a good point of Deborah's, because many of our conferences are not full catering. So it's more AM and PM breaks. There may be a couple of meals along the way, but there isn't a preset breakfast. There isn't a preset lunch. But years ago, when we were starting to ask the question, and years ago, what were we limited to? We were asking, are you vegetarian or are you kosher?
Right.
We weren't really asking about allergens or anything else. So it became, by default, almost an exercise in profiling. And I hate to say it that way, but I remember getting forms in from people when we were getting paper forms via fax. So again, I'm dating myself. And I saw one come in from a gentleman and questioned by his last name his requirement for kosher. But when I called him and asked him, he said, well, what does that mean? And I explained. He said, oh, I don't need that. I said, but then you checked it off. That's why I'm calling. He said, I thought I had to choose one, and I'm not a vegetarian. So I looked at the form and I said, well, I guess it's time for us to update how we ask that question. And this was probably in the early 2000 time period or even before that. So he said, no, I will not require kosher. I'm not a vegetarian. I said, thank you very much. And he laughed and I laughed and everything was fine. But then we started to, you know, change how the question was asked. And then certainly more dietary requirements come in, and we need to handle those definitely on a case-by-case basis. just like the attendee who isn't kosher, but she's a lactose-free, gluten-free vegetarian with an avocado allergy.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think Sue Fishkoff wrote, I'm trying to find my book that she wrote, but it was a book on kosher. And like, there's so many people who are not Jewish that follow the kosher certification because they trust the certification.
Yes.
It's a large contingency of people.
A very large contingency of people, because it's easily, once you know the symbols, are very easily recognizable on grocery packaging.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having to check on read ingredients, you can first look for the symbol and be like, okay, I know I'm good. So right. A lot of people have researched it and studied it. And also because kosher certifiers go in more often than the FDA, and they do surprise visits and everything, there is sometimes a higher level of quality. So a lot of times when we would advertise that we have kosher foods in the grocery stores, we call it quality kosher foods, so that people know that, sometimes kosher really just means fit and proper, but a lot of times because of the cleanliness, they tend to be higher quality products because of all the different restrictions that have to be. I mean, not necessarily healthier. I mean, kosher right. Chicken fat is still chicken fat, but I'm just saying, in a sense, the way that they're made is in a cleaner process.
Right. Well, and I went through my kitchen cabinet before we got on the show today to look for some packaging that is kosher certified. And it's kind of amazing because I'm gluten-free, but I'm like the specialty foods that I eat, most of them have the kosher certification on it, but other kind of standard foods that are in our cabinet don't have it. And so, and I guess that's a manufacturing choice of doing that. But so let's see if we get this right. So that right?
OU.
The OU right there is the OU certification. And then
that's probably the one that's most widely known, right. I would say. Yep, OU.
And this is the Banza pasta. And then I actually saw this one on my Go Macro bars. This is that one of the triangle.
That's a CRC, it looks like.
Yes.
CRC is the Chicago Rabbinical Council. So what's interesting is because there's like over 150 different kosher certifying agencies in the United States alone.
Wow.
A lot of times you can find out where the product was made by the symbol. So like if that one has the CRC on it, most likely is manufactured in Chicago. There's even ones from Canada. One of my favorites is actually Earth K, which is out of California, that not only certifies that the item is kosher, but also that it's used sustainable practices for the earth while being made. So every kosher certification agency normally has a way where they print out their rules and guidelines that they hold by. And you'll find kosher consumers are not so much, strict on brand as they are on following the symbols. So like Nancy said, OU, the Orthodox Union, is the most widely accepted one, but also closely followed by this Star K, Circle K, and Chaf K, which looks like that Hebrew letter with a K inside of it. Uh-huh. Those are like the biggest ones, but there are kosherquest.org actually is a really good website that will list by country acceptable kosher certifications, and you'll be surprised about the hundreds of certifications that are out there that people will hold by. If you're getting something from Mexico, there's a Mexican one. MK is Montreal kosher, like all different ones. If you're in Washington, there's one. And then, Atlanta has its own. Almost every place has its own little local VOD, which is a kosher certificate. Even Jacksonville, Florida, where I am, has its own. So we have a manufacturer here named Olive My Pickle that uses the local one here. So it's really amazing, all the different ones that are out there, and they're very affordable. A lot of people think that becoming kosher certified is cost prohibitive. It really isn't, especially when you know of all these different agencies. But if you are planning on nationally doing a brand, like nationally doing a product, like the products you have, it's better to go with those top 4 because they're the most recognizable. But if you are a local caterer or, a hotel, feel free to use the local VOD or whatever the local kosher certifying agency is. And you can also find their names listed on kosherquest.org. It's more economical. They're local. They'll come and do a quick kosher and certification for you. And most often your meeting attendees will look them up. Like you can say, who does your kosher certification? And you can be Gesher K, the Jacksonville VOD, and they'll Google it and they'll be like, all right, I'm good with that one. So it's like it really, that case you can be flexible for cost efficiencies.
Nancy, you had something to say.
Yes, if you pick up your macro bar, there was something else that I wanted to point out to you. Because under the certification, it has the word parv, which means that if you kept kosher, you could eat that at dinner with your steak, or you could eat it at breakfast with your pancakes and milk.
Okay.
It means there's no dairy or meat in it at all. And that symbol is what a lot of vegans actually use, because they don't want the dairy in their product, because kosher symbols are required to state with at least a D if there's dairy in it, and if it's meat, it has to write the word meat. So sometimes if there is no word parv, it naturally, that OU by itself naturally means parv. But like when you've got something like imitation chicken broth, or something that or something that would normally have, pork fat in it, or something that would normally have dairy in it, like ice cream, like imitation ice cream or almond milk ice cream. A lot of times you'll see that word parv on there because no, we're serious. We're telling you there is no dairy, there is no meat in this product.
Well, and thanks for explaining that as well. And I remember going to dinner with a friend of mine a long time ago, and I knew she was Jewish, but when we sat down to dinner, she was asking the server all the questions that I kind of ask as a person with food allergies. And I thought it was quite interesting. She's like, is that steak cooked in butter? Or is, how is this served? And, what kind of stock do you use? And so, somebody with food allergies, and you both mentioned it kind of, is like, we're still, and eating kosher, you want to know what the ingredients are.
Yes.
Because you're trying to avoid specific things for specific reasons.
Most often dairy and meat is kept separate, but eggs and fish are considered parv. So you can see them used in either dairy meals or meat meals together. And those who are kosher style and may eat out, or may have a strict kosher home and may eat out, they may eat only dairy out, like Nancy said, where it's just easier, just be like, I'm vegetarian, I don't have to worry about the kosher meats. But there's some people who might, but they're still uncomfortable of mixing that dairy and meat. So if they're going to a fondue place, they'll be like, is this the vegetarian bouillon, or how are you rendering your oil? Like for my neighbor who's, putting in a piece of ham, and is it going, those types of things. Interestingly enough, French fries pose the biggest problem in kosher certification because of the way that the oil is rendered from like making things like pork rinds or other things that may be made in the same facility. There's certain kosher or certification agencies that say you can't render the oil enough to get out some of those scientific food impurities. So they say this facility would need a flushing, a cleaning, and a completely new batch of oil for the kosher stuff first, and then do the pork rinds at the end. And then you're gonna have to get completely new oil. You can't render it. So there's some certification agencies that say rendered oil is okay, and there's some that say it's not. And a lot of people will just follow the ones that say it's not. So it's very important when you're buying your ingredients as a caterer or a meeting planner that you make sure whatever kosher certifying agency you use, that you're actually buying the French fries, if you buy pre-frozen French fries, industrial pack, that have a certification that is accepted by your kosher certifier.
Well, and that brings up, and Nancy, I'm gonna bring up something we talked about the other day, but that also just brings up the equipment that is used in kitchens for food allergic people as well, because the frying of French fries, and what else was fried in there. If somebody's allergic to fish, did you fry the fish sticks in there, etc. So Nancy, so asking those questions is really important. And I actually had that experience at a Marriott. I'm like, are these French fries gluten-free, or do you have a separate fryer? And they're like, these two different servers said, yeah, we have a separate fryer, but we've been so busy, we just haven't been paying attention to it and using the same fryer. I'm like, okay, well then your French fries are not gluten-free. But Nancy, you mentioned the other day Sephardic and I can't Ashkenazi. Can you talk about those?
So to clue Deborah in a little bit, we segued over to Passover. And I was talking to Tracy about the difference between Ashkenazi and Sephardic, Eastern European versus Mediterranean, and the staples of the diets of the different groups. So my family comes from Eastern Europe, so Ashkenazi, and I have had cousins who claim to be Sephardic for Passover so that they can eat beans and rice and peas and peanut butter. And I say, well, no, it doesn't actually work that way. Your ancestors are from Eastern Europe. So no, you need to eliminate these from the holiday. So there's been a lot of discussion about whether that's valid any longer, the history behind it. So I think Deborah can probably springboard from that because I see her smiling and shaking her head. So yes, we give up peas and beans and rice for 8 days of Passover, and it's okay. We can do without those things for 8 days, but it's from where your family emanates.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's all because Passover is about leavening. So when the Jews left Egypt, they left fast enough, not enough time for their bread to rise. So they had the flat, crackers, matzah. Well, when celebrating Passover, we take that seriously, and we sort of eliminate all starches and stuff that would make things rise. Now, Eastern Europeans then are like rice rises, corn pops, beans fluff, like things that sort of leaven in sort of a sense. We had a potato famine, so somehow potato starch didn't make the cut. So the Ashkenazi Jews eat potatoes. But if you go to Mediterranean, Spanish, Italy, Israel, Persia, those types of places, they eat the rice, they eat the corn, they eat what's called kitniu, and it does not classify to them. They're like, no, we're just talking about bread. We're not talking about all these other things that could also potentially rise. So it's a difference in where the leading rabbis from where you come from do. So in the grocery stores, things are marked with kitniu or without kitniu. And like Nancy said, a lot of people are like, for ease, they're like, I don't want to give up my peanut butter. I'm going to be Sephardic. And so unless you've like married into a Sephardic family and like that's now your custom, or something like that, you're really kind of stuck. The same thing of if you wait 6 hours between meat and dairy, or 3 hours. If you're from Germany, you wait 3 hours. If you're from Holland, you wait 1 hour. If you're from Eastern Europe, you wait 6 hours. And I just recently stayed at a friend's house who keeps 3 hours. He's like, how do you even eat lunch? Like, you can't have a turkey sandwich because you don't know if you're going to have pizza for dinner. I'm like, I just decide whether I'm having pizza for dinner before I eat my turkey sandwich for lunch. So it's like, it depends on how you were raised and where you come from. But that's also where it talks about kosher can be part of tradition as well, and how people have grown up and how people are accustomed to doing it. So it really does vary on lifestyle.
So somebody is telling us that this is fascinating and so helpful. Thank you very much. And I'm learning a lot. And I think just listening to all of this goes back to what Nancy said, is just pick up the telephone and call the person who's requested to have kosher at your event, because you can learn so much. And I actually did that at an event a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. And a couple of them were like, oh, well, I don't need the certified meal. And, that was clicked by accident. So you might get some of those, but then also you can understand better. Now, one of my questions is, what if you're in a very remote area, like you're doing an incentive trip, and there's not a kosher caterer, there's not somebody that can come in and kasherize the kitchen? What can a planner do?
Oh, there's so much that can be done nowadays. It's amazing. I mean, you can even go on cruise ships where they don't kosher any kitchen, and there's catered meals. So you can pretty much, there are kosher caterers across the country who will ship, who will flash freeze, almost like, tray pack meals, or even fresh meals. You can have fresh meals delivered overnight too. Even in the airports in the Northeast, you're starting to see at the normal airport convenience shops, some things that are certified kosher too that are going in there. There's also things that 75% of the grocery store is kosher. You find those little hummus and chips, things right there the little packages. You can put that out there for a lunch. And that is a great lunch along with some fruit, and like there's things that you can get at the grocery store, pre-packaged, already made, that you can do. But the majority of when you get meals that are wrapped, the key of being a caterer and keeping it kosher is it needs to be heated double wrapped. So if you're heating it, most of them come with 2 wrappings, which means there's a film on top and then there's like a poly bag on the outside. Don't open any bags. That's the worst mistake a caterer can make, is to open a bag before heating it and serving it. You heat it up and you serve it in the bag, or serve it in its 2 wraps of twin foil. And then you nicely have a server come by right after serving and remove all the trash, because I always call myself the tinfoil queen, because I'll be sitting in the middle of a meeting and I've got like 5 balls of tinfoil in front from all the different things that I had wrapped, including my piece of bread, and everything. So, it comes wrapped. And if you're trying to have a very elegant affair where you don't want anything coming out with tinfoil and wrapped, one of the things to do is to work with your kosher participants, especially if you have like a table. I will tell you that kosher participants prefer not to be seated together just with other kosher participants. They're there to network at a conference. They want to meet everybody. So they prefer to have the meal delivered to wherever their normal assigned seating would be. But you normally can find, if there is a table like at a wedding or that sort of an event that is kosher and you want it to come out a special way, nice and plated, you can buy brand new plates, brand new silverware, low income stuff, have a separate kitchen or a separate room where you have somebody there who will be there for the unboxing, and like that everybody else trusts, and then the waiters can bring it out on a nice plated. So I've done that at some very high-end fundraisers before, where I volunteered and everybody who kept kosher at the event knew that I was doing that. Everything came in from the caterer double wrapped. I would meet one of the chef assistants in a side room, and we would take after it was heated, we'd take everything out of the packages, plate it nicely, and it came out on plates with wrapped silverware. So even
that's awesome.
Kosher food. So it's good.
That's really awesome. I like that process. Nancy?
Something else that Deborah could probably speak to in more detail, but something that I witnessed, but I know about the koshering process. I was at a resort in Puerto Rico years ago, and my group's event was the last event in this smaller section of the conference center area, and it had its own kitchen. And my group was eating, the lobster tail, filet mignon sort of dual plate. But the following week was preparation for an organization coming in to do Passover in Puerto Rico. So people often will leave their homes, go somewhere else that's been prepared, that hosts meals, that hosts services, that hosts activities for families. And this is a huge business. And I think it used to be just Florida, but now it's all over. So my group finished their meal, and the next morning the team came in to get started. And it's not just about the ovens and the countertops and the refrigerator, it's also about the dishes and plates. So we were on the terrace of the main part of the hotel watching the teams take tubs of dishes and silverware into the ocean.
What? What were they doing in the ocean?
Well, that is called toiveling. Yeah, that is called toiveling. And that depends on, and not all caterers have to do that. It depends on if the caterer, who owns the catering company, etc. So if you're buying brand new plates and silverware, some kosher certifying agencies consider a process that's called toiveling, which is it's a really, really old tradition. There's some things we just hang on for traditions. So not all kosher certified agencies do it. It's not about cleanliness. That is one of the ritual things. But some agencies say you need to do it. Some agencies say you don't need to do it. But most of the time you will bring in brand new plates, etc. Some of these kosher hotels that do a Passover for a week will save their dishes from year to year. So if they do this every year, and it is like Nancy said, it's a huge business. You can make a lot of money. People will pay thousands of dollars for a 1-week vacation in a hotel to a place that they normally can't get kosher food in, a resort, and spend the whole week there, especially since you're supposed to clean your house for Passover, and you get out of cleaning your house when you go away for a week. So anybody would want to take a vacation to avoid cleaning. And they will save these dishes and wrap them and tape them for an entire year and then just reuse them every year. So it's not an investment you have to make every year.
Wow.
So you talked early on about the numbers of sets of dishes. And I said, well, at a minimum 4, because people will want to avoid turning their homes inside out to establish it ready for Passover. Because at the very least, you would need your everyday milk and meat dishes and pots and pans, but then you would turn over for that 8-day period to your milk and meat Passover dishes and pots and pans. So then if you then have, your fine china versus your everyday, oh my gosh, you could be talking about 8 sets of dishes, maybe not 8 sets of pots and pans, but you definitely have a distinction of your milk and meat sets and then your pots and pans, your Passover items.
Wow.
So that's why people will say, we're going to spend $10,000 to take our family to Miami for Passover instead of spending a week before or 2 weeks before prepping the house for Passover.
Would the cost be comparison?
The cleaning process gets very intense.
It depends on how much you value your time. You said it's cost prohibitive. If you put a value to your time, a lot of people say, yes, it's worth it. Also, if you've never made Passover in your house before, you do need to invest in those dishes, those pots, those pans, plus the cleaning and that kind of stuff. So, but there's so many things that exist. Lots of people like to do it. You will see so many Jewish people in Disney. So, that week, there's tons of resorts in Orlando, Puerto Rico, anywhere, you could literally go anywhere in the world. There's cruises, there's everything. So it's a great time to travel.
And my message was not that it wasn't worth cleaning your home. Please don't misunderstand that, because people do take it very seriously. They set beautiful tables for Passover. They have traditional family foods that they do for Passover, recipes passed down. But then there are other people who do say, we're just going to vacate and, move somewhere else for the week. So it really depends on the amount of time and also the amount of hands you have helping you go after every last crumb and everything.
Caterers can, because people are willing to pay that premium to come, they can take advantage of that and include that cost of koshering. That might be why it's inexpensive, but it's going to cost you $500 to kosher your equipment and all the stuff, like your pots and pans, and do all this stuff, bringing in new plates and things. That goes into the cost of the actual event, in addition to the cost of the foods. So people do take that into account. But then if you do it year after year and you minimize your expenses, then you may get larger patronage because you won't be as expensive as your neighbor who's doing it for the first time. So.
Okay. Wow. There's so much to learn, and I am so appreciative of both of you. I mean, this is so intriguing, and it's just another way to understand how to create an inclusive food and dining experience, and not to, and to make money on it as well. Not to think of it as a frustration, but look at it as an opportunity. Because if you never know who's in the room, and maybe that person is going to hire you later on, come do their event at your property.
If you do kosher right, you can definitely have a lot of advocacy and a lot of new business from it.
Okay. So to end it, I want to know because we're coming up on the 2 holidays and there's a lot of food prep, I want to know, what are your favorite dishes to eat for Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah? Or anytime. Yeah.
Oh, well, a great bowl of matzo ball soup is always a good thing, but there's also the debate, lighter matzo balls, a little bit heavier in consistency. That's something that isn't just a Passover sort of thing. That's Rosh Hashanah and when you're not feeling good.
A lot of people do like the matzo ball soup, but in my family, we're saving matzo balls for Passover. So we will do a chicken noodle soup, and an apple and honey cake is honey cakes are really, really big Rosh Hashanah thing. Pomegranates are considered a new fruit. So pomegranate chicken is probably my favorite Rosh Hashanah meal.
Oh, there's an idea. I have to try that. Pomegranate chicken.
Send that recipe on, Deborah. That sounds delicious.
I like that too. Yes, absolutely. Because I have a son who is all about pomegranate seeds and will just devour them all. So yeah, I'd like to try that too. Brisket's always a big thing in our family. Brisket. Oh gosh, so many. There are tons of family recipes that have been passed down. My mother-in-law will always make mandel bread. And then, does it have nuts or does it not have nuts? So
A lot of people won't eat nuts on Rosh Hashanah because it's interesting. You can look it up. It's easy to find. There's symbolic foods for the holiday. So people eat a lot of carrots and raisins and leeks and gourds because it brings it's almost like on New Year's Day how people like to eat black beans and those black-eyed peas or whatever. It's like those symbolic foods that mean something. And so there's a lot of mean wealth, mean happiness, mean fertility, all this stuff. People will be eating all these specific foods, and so you can look them up, and it can be fun when you're trying to make all your meals with this.
That's so fun. Yeah, well, I will definitely be looking that up because that sounds really interesting as well. Okay, so just to close this out, is there anything else that you want to say about convening kosher at events and or the holidays?
It's worth it. It's definitely worth it to pay attention to it, because when you do it right, it really, the word of mouth goes, and it will really help your business.
Addressing attendees' needs. I think that's what it comes down to, whether it's kosher, whether it's allergy, whether it's any other physical requirement. I think it's addressing people one-on-one. And I'm sorry, people these days just aren't quick to pick up the phone. And I think we really need to do more of that. Speak to the attendee, find out what their needs are. You can certainly find that out from email, but you're making a personal connection in advance, and that's going to help you when you're on site as well.
I love that. Thank you very much. Well, thank you both so much. I look forward to seeing pictures of your food and from the holidays. And Deborah, Nancy and I want that recipe. So please send it on.
All right.
Everybody that has been here listening, thank you so much for listening, and I really appreciate it. You've been listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. We are live here every Wednesday at 12 o'clock talking about how to create safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences. And until next time, stay safe and eat well.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.